Every pastor feels the pressure of Sunday, but sometimes it's not just the pressure of preaching or creating a church service. It's the pressure of a world that feels broken. There's a shooting, a public figure is assassinated. There's violence in your own community. And suddenly, and you know how this feels, your people, your church, are walking into the room carrying pain and fear and lots of questions. And they're looking to you for guidance. They're looking to you to be the voice of spiritual clarity. Do you speak into it or do you stay silent? I mean, that's really the tension, right? I mean, stay silent and you risk looking completely tone deaf. If you say too much, though, you risk dividing the room. And if you always respond to the headlines, you risk becoming the current events church. I mean, that's the pressure, really. If you've ever kind of felt paralyzed by it, join the club. You are in good company. Instead of guessing in these moments, though, what you really need is a framework. Like you need a simple and kind of pre-decided way to lead your people through cultural crisis. And here's kind of what I think that could look like. I've been processing this a lot in light of what's happened in the last month or two across the United States, and talking to so many of my pastors that I work with who stood up on a Sunday morning and had to speak into a common emotion that everyone was feeling, and listening to the feedback they got, because everybody did it a little differently. Some arguably much better than others. So it made me think, what if we had a framework for this? Like, what if we had some kind of way to guide us through when to say, what to say, how much to say? So a couple of things that I think this framework really needs. One, it needs a when to address it question. We're going to call this the litmus test, right? I mean, not every headline belongs in your service, right? So the key question to ask is this: are most of our people carrying this into the room today? If there's a single topic that the majority of people are carrying into the room, then yeah, you should probably acknowledge it. If the answer is no, maybe you should address it in smaller ways. Maybe you do it through individual pastoral care conversations or in a group setting, or it could be a social or an email post. This filter, what I love about the litmus test filter is it keeps you from being overwhelmed by every news cycle while still being responsive to the moments that matter the most. The beauty of this litmus test is it kind of takes your emotion out of it too, because there are some things that are going to happen culturally that you are more passionate about than maybe other people are. There may be things that happen that you can see through or don't bother you as much, but the majority of your church is bothered by it. So again, the litmus test is this: if there's a cultural crisis, a cultural moment in your community, in the county, country, the world, if the majority of people in your church are walking in on Sunday morning and it is top of mind, it should be addressed. If less than the majority are walking in thinking about it, you've got to determine if it's worth addressing in other mechanisms, like social posts, emails, individual pastoral conversations. I'll give you a great example. One church I work with in Indiana, they do a great job of this. As a part of their litmus test, they offer something they call cultural conversations. And they don't have them scheduled every month, but when something rises to the surface that they feel like is worth having a conversation, they will just announce it. Next week, we're going to offer our next episode of Cultural Conversations, and it's led by a staff member who kind of unpacks a topic, unpacks the biblical theological response to it, what Christians should do in light of it, and then they do a lot of Q&A in that moment with people. Again, this gives, if you go to a church of 100 people and 15 people are passionate about something, I don't know that it's worth speaking into it on Sunday morning necessarily. However, a cultural conversation on a Sunday afternoon or a Wednesday evening may be a perfect opportunity for those 15 people. So again, litmus test. That's the first step in the process, in the framework. Okay, number two, second step. how do you address it? Like once you've recognized that something needs to be addressed, how do you address it? And I like to call this the response ladder. Like once you decide it's time, the next step obviously is to decide how we're going to address it. I mean, political debates deserve a different conversation than kind of lighter issues, right? If it's something that's lighter, maybe it's a brief email or a prayer prompt for people. I mean, if it's a national tragedy, right? Well, that's a moment for something very personal from you, probably in the service, something like that. Like here's kind of the leadership principle behind this second part, the response ladder, the second part of our framework. The more emotional the moment, the more personal the response needs to be. So in a highly emotional thing, you can't bury it deep in your sermon, right? If people are wondering what you're going to say, you should probably meet them pretty early on in the service and say something. I'll give you just a very practical example of this. Of course, when I mentioned an assassination, we probably all thought Charlie Kirk, and that's what that was, right? It was a murder, an assassination. And we can argue, and we're not going to in this episode. I mean, is it Christian? Is he a martyr? Was it just political? I mean, all of those things could be valid. And who's for us to determine that, right? So how emotional was that? It's highly emotional. Let's go back to our litmus test. Were most people on Sunday morning walking to your church and that was still top of mind for them? Yeah, probably. And by majority, it probably wasn't 51%. It's probably 95%, maybe 100. And people were wondering what you were going to say. So the litmus test, well, we passed that. We definitely need to talk about it, and we need to talk about it on Sunday. So how do we do that? Well, we could alter our sermon, and that would be okay if you felt like you needed to do that. Now, how you speak about it, I would have some opinions on that, but that's not for today. But you should probably talk about it. But do you talk about it in the welcome up top? Do you talk about it maybe before the sermon? Do you talk about it in the sermon? Do you do it in the dismissal? I mean, again, so many different ways to do this. Well, if the vast majority of people, 90+%, are walking into your church thinking about it, for you to wait until the sermon to talk about it feels a little tone deaf to me. I think talking about it early makes a lot of sense because everyone is thinking about it. And, you may say, well, I don't want to disrupt the flow of our service. We do the welcome. And I get it. But sometimes we need to disrupt the flow because if everybody is thinking about something, waiting 25 minutes to talk about it doesn't make them quit thinking about it. In fact, they're probably going to spend the first 25 minutes going, I wonder why they're not talking about this. So the more emotional, the more personal, and the more public or emotional, probably the earlier we should chat about it. All right, so let's move on. Number 3, what's kind of the third thing? And this is a hard one. This is the what to say. And I would argue what not to say. What do we say and what do we try not to say? Well, these are moments where we really want to point people upward. That's what we want to say. We want to say things that move people's eyes and lift them upward towards heaven, towards God, not side to side, red, blue, right, wrong, all of those things. And here's the deal, right? These moments are filled with landmines, man. I mean, it is easy to frame almost any conversation today as red versus blue or right versus left. And politics are so invasive into everything that we do, including, unfortunately, Christianity. But pastors, we're not called to point people sideways. We point people vertically, right? We point people upward. So just some quick thoughts on this. One, don't turn the pulpit into a partisan microphone. That is not the mission of your local church. And what should you do, though? You should frame every moment as brokenness versus redemption, evil versus good, humanity versus the kingdom. And this is really critical, I think, give people next steps too. Don't just talk about something cultural and then, pray for the people involved and move on. That's fine, but prayer is one step. But are there other steps that we can give people? For instance, again, go back to, this national tragedy of Charlie Kirk. And by the way, that week, lots happened, right? Not just the Charlie Kirk assassination. You had the woman in Charlotte who was stabbed on the subway, the light rail. You had a school shooting on the same day in Colorado that Charlie Kirk was shot. And I did see a stat. Again, I can't back this up. I didn't do the research. But I think the stat said that between Charlie Kirk's assassination and Sunday morning, there were 423 gun deaths in our country, in the United States. I think in the U.S. to date, there's some 22,000 or something like that, maybe more gun deaths. So again, I mean, this isn't a partisan issue, right? And this is not just a right versus left. I mean, this is an evil issue, right? So what do? Well, we give people next steps. And just, again, go back to that moment, that weekend after Charlie Kirk and the Charlotte person. I mean, go back to that week. I mean, praying is important. And I think that's an important step for everyone. However, I also think that we can display some powerful things about our faith system in this prayer. Because we don't just pray for the people who were victims. I think about the people, like in the shooter's case with Charlie Kirk. Think about the poor father whose son shot Charlie. And then he discovered that and had to question him and sought advice from his pastor, knowing that he's about to march his son down to the police station for the death penalty, most likely the death penalty. I mean, what a horrific thing as a father. Now, I'm a father of 4 children, and so maybe that hits me differently, but pray for the father, pray for the mother, pray for the siblings, for the family of the shooter, pray for the soul of the shooter, a 22-year-old who did a horrific thing and should be punished for it. However, it doesn't mean we don't pray for him. It's a powerful thing to put on display, isn't it? An action step. I think we also can give additional action steps, though, like extend forgiveness for people. And I think we can encourage people who are believers to do everything they can to kind of model the way of Jesus in their communities, in this world, to live daily in a way that puts Jesus's love on display. When you channel kind of the pressure of this moment back to Jesus, that's really the most effective way to lift people's eyes above the chaos. I mean, I don't want these things to happen, right? No pastor, no human wants tragedy to happen. However, I do think it's going to happen more frequently than it used to happen. And even if the frequency isn't greater, I just think the elevated temperature is going to make it more noticeable, which means we're probably going to have more opportunities than in the past to speak into these moments. And as much as I don't want tragedy to happen, when tragedy does strike, and the litmus test proves true that the majority of people are thinking about it, it's top of mind, you just were given an opportunity to elevate the gospel in a very powerful way for people. And I would encourage you to think through it deeply, how you can leverage, and I hate to use that word, but leverage a moment to lift people's eyes. I mean, by the way, just really quick, isn't this what we do during funerals a lot? I mean, it's often a tragic moment that we're sitting in and we're leading and guiding a family and a community through the loss, but we use that loss to point people to Jesus. It's kind of the same thing. And here's the fourth thing, the last part of our framework. We always want to lead towards unity in the body of Christ. And here's why. The culture that we live in is always going to seek to divide because you can conquer what is divided. The church must not be divided. We need to be unified. And by the way, that might mean leading your people in prayer. It may mean sharing communion. It may mean reminding them of Jesus' prayer in John 17. I mean, you remember this. The only thing that Jesus prayed directly for you and I about is unity. Unity in the faith, unity in the church, and that his followers would be one. So kind of here's the point, right? Like we can't let cultural fractures break the body of Christ. Instead, we should kind of use these moments to strengthen the bonds of unity. Now, really quick, we're on this topic of unity. It is all too easy in today's world, and some of you have maybe done this, and I would tell you I don't think it's the right thing to do. It is so easy to pick a horizontal side of any topic and build a following from it. I mean, politically, if you wanted to, I live in Atlanta, okay, so Southeast. Atlanta's pretty multicultural, but suburbs, not as much. It's pretty red, politically, heavily Republican leaning in the suburbs and rural areas. If you wanted to build a really big local church in my community, all you really need to do is make your Sunday morning look and sound like a conservative cable news channel. And people will flock to that church. I would also tell you, though, that's not a church, right? It's just a gathering. It's kind of a country club, a red one, but it's a country club. And that's not what we're trying to do. Like, we're not trying to unify people around a horizontal topic. We're trying to unify people around a vertical relationship. We're trying to unify people around Jesus and around living the way of Jesus. That's really what we're trying to do. So don't allow these cultural moments to force you to take a stand, But however, I also don't want you to be centrist and not say anything, That's unhelpful too. Instead of doing that, point people vertically. So just really quick, let's be very practical as we wrap up. How do you prepare for this practically? So one, we talked about each of these things. So just really quick review. One, you need to build your litmus test. Like, you need to decide now when cultural moments deserve attention. So when a cultural moment happens, you've got the test ready. You know exactly how you should probably respond, okay? Next thing, you need to kind of build your own response ladder. Know in advance, what is going to be an email based on your litmus test? What's probably deserving of an email? What needs maybe a public prayer, but that's it? Or what requires like an interruption in our service, and we talk about it publicly. Next, write that framework statement down. Like, commit that you'll always point people upward and not sideways. So when you think about what you're going to say, write it down. Like, commit to always thinking through it and not taking a side other than the side of Jesus. And then the last thing I would tell you to do, I think that it's probably a good idea to maybe pre-write a 90-second response in a prayer and just kind of keep it on hand so that you know. And again, since we're pointing people upward, what the cultural moment isn't as important as the direction that we're taking people. So go ahead and put together some verbiage on this so that you are prepared to point people towards the only hope and help we actually have, Jesus. That way, like when the next hard Sunday comes, you're not scrambling, you're ready. Because, here's the truth, right? You don't get to choose the cultural moments. They're just going to happen. But you do get to choose how you lead people through them. And when the pressure rises, clarity and preparation, that's what gives you confidence.